Well, I think this is going to be a fun topic, probably products that we're somewhat familiar with. We have three speakers today, and I'd like to invite them up. First of all is Lenny with Eastside Distilling, Aaron Sarnoff with Towns Ciderhouse, which we've had some samples brought for us, and Gary Mortenson from the Stoller family estates. I think it's going to be interesting. We're going to look at the issues that they face as they build their businesses and look for real estate and warehousing for their needs. Certainly that industry for Oregon and across the country is expanding incredibly rapidly. I moved out here about 12, 13 years ago, and to see what's happened in the wine industry is stunning. And now to see the distilling and now the cider business, it's become such an important product. And of course, with growth become issues. So what I'd like to do first of all is ask you all to have a seat, if you will. And they all have great stories, and I'd like to start with that. And Lenny, may I ask you to maybe start things with your background and the growth of Eastside Distilling, which is becoming a very branded product here.
Well, thanks for having me here. My story starts out kind of fun. I was in Belize way back in 2006. Was on the beach drinking my $7 a liter rum, and it was really good. And I initially thought about doing import, and I actually met one of the other local distillers, Tom from New Deal. I'm sure you've all heard of New Deal. Back when Tom was working in a space about the size of a small garage. And kind of got some information from Tom and figured out if Tom could do it in a little space in the garage, I could do it myself. So got my TTB permit in 2009 and got our own tasting room in 2010. And we've been growing ever since. We have 13 SKUs right now. You may have seen our stores in the malls. We have a new building that we're doing our build out at MLK and Mill. We're expanding into a number of different states, and we're slowly doing our nationwide rollout.
Good. All right. Gary, how about yourself?
Gary Mortenson. I'm a McMinnville boy along with Mr. Morse down there. Got started in the wine industry in 1988, and then at Sokol Blosser and worked there until 1999. Saw a lot of things, a lot of change during that time. Went off into technology for 13 years and had the opportunity to come back and lead Stoller in 2012. So it's been really fun to sort of have a bookend career where I've seen a lot of early stage things with the industry, and now to come back at this point and see what's happening. So a lot of growth going on at that point.
And Aaron.
Howdy. Aaron Sarnoff, Towns Cider. I guess our story starts back in 2001 when I may or may not have been legal to drink the products that I make. One of my childhood friends, his family had moved to Barcelona while we were in high school, and on a trip to visit, I found the then 15-year-old Lee Larson, who knew all the best clubs and haunts in Barcelona. And he toured me around the city. We had plenty to drink, and among the drinks we tried was hard apple cider. They have a fantastic cider culture there in Europe. It wasn't destroyed by prohibition like cider was here in the U.S. And upon returning to the States, the only thing I could find was a very sweet, kind of an artificially flavored beverage that was called cider but was not, at least not to what I had enjoyed in Europe. So we started doing it in our basement, and in 2009, there was a wedding. We brought lots of kegs, and giggling bridesmaids, drunk parents. It seemed like possibly this could be a road for us. So 2010, we rented out what was then a 1,000 square foot auto repair shop and converted it to a makeshift hard cider production facility. We've been growing with triple-digit growth ever since. We now distribute to 9 states, 32 employees. We're the second largest craft cider producer in the nation. We're based out of Corvallis.
Did you say second largest?
I did.
In the nation?
Craft producer, ninth largest overall.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. So when we were talking out front, the word that you brought up was zoning. and the issues that you're facing. And it was an interesting story that you told me.
Sure. Yeah, so cider has kind of a conundrum that we need large utility demand, water, power, wastewater disposal, gas, and we need industrial trucking. We need loading docks. We need lots of access, warehouse space. But we also have an agricultural aspect, much like a vineyard. People coming to our facilities expect to see apples. They expect to see where your ingredients are coming from. Now, we do source from numerous locations, but we also have our own orchards. And then the third aspect is the commercial aspect, and our tasting room is by far the most profitable component of our business, at least on a gallon per gallon basis. It's about 4 times the revenue stream as a wholesale distribution. So with that kind of revenue coming from a tap room, we want to be able to facilitate that. But finding industrial space that has opened to letting the public in, developing it for food and alcohol service, that also allows crops to be planted in the same zone is pretty much non-existent, at least in the Corvallis neighborhood. Mr. Brent over there has been helping us do battle with the city for the last couple of years, and it's certainly continues to be a challenge.
You know, it's interesting. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm an account manager, sales, and everybody I talk to, it seems to be an ongoing battle with the cities, the governments, the politics of Oregon, Portland, in your case, Corvallis. Is that unique to this area, or is that you'd find anywhere?
Well, we do business here,
Yeah.
but I imagine it's something that you're going to find everywhere. Certain communities are. Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
I'm sure certain communities are very different. I mean, we actually span 2 counties. One of our facilities is in Lynn County, and the other in Benton. And the experience between the two, as far as the governmental agencies that oversee those counties, is night and day. One of them suggested I bring in pizza to get a stamp approval a day earlier, and the other one was happy to keep me in court for as long as till the end of time.
So while the meter was running, right?
Yeah, right. So it is, I think, a very locale to locale dependent.
Yeah. Now, Lenny, when we talked to you, you mentioned that warehousing is a unique issue that you have to work with, again, with the city.
Well, one of the issues that we're dealing with, and every distillery in the nation is dealing with, and these guys don't have to deal with this. My product is flammable; it burns. So, what we're seeing nationwide is that there is a really large book called Distilled Standards and Practices that Discus, the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, put together. It's a really nice book, has all these regulations. Oil refineries put this together. So there are regulations for oil refineries, and I'm going to go on a limb here. Alcohol burns and gasoline explodes. So there's a book out there with all these regulations that deal with refining oil and some dealing with stuff that goes boom. And stuff that goes boom is a lot different than stuff that burns. And so every city is dealing with how to regulate distilleries, we all want everything to be safe, but I'm not making gasoline, so I don't have to deal with the same issues as that. So there's a lot of kind of come and go, and we're trying to get with some of the like ADI and some of the national organizations to try to put together a standards and practices for urban distilleries. But it's been a challenge, and Portland has not been an easy challenge, to say the least. One of the things that I specifically mentioned to him that I wanted to mention to all of you that are in the real estate industry is the city of Portland is not going to allow spirits in barrels to be stacked more than 2 high. My building is 30 feet high. I have sprinklers. Can't stack more than 2 high. And you actually don't get that, a barrel of whiskey is about 27 cases. Really not that much. So somebody somewhere somehow is going to build a rack house outside of the city of Portland, and somebody out there should find somebody to build like a 20,000 square foot warehouse or larger, and there's 80 distilleries in Oregon and like 140 in Washington, and all of them could use somewhere to put barrels of whiskey. You really would just need a warehouse that's secure. It's got sprinklers. Find Estacada maybe won't care. I don't know. It's just going to depend on, and it could be remote. So it would need to be remote. So if it burns down, it's not going to cause any problems. Well, Jack Daniels and all those companies, they have their rack houses, out in the middle of nowhere. But there are a lot of challenges. But I think there's going to be some real opportunities for the emerging spirits industry, because we need storage. We need somewhere to put barrels of product, and we're not going to be able to do it in Portland.
I find your story particularly interesting because I work for a company called Alpha Media, and you would know our properties as KXL Radio, KINK, 98.7, The Bull, some others. And you have been very aggressive in your marketing. Would that work to create a cooperative with your competitors? Is there that mutual understanding that could be agreed on?
Well, yes and no. A lot of the distillers are kind of engineering guys, and they kind of like to do things themselves. But they're not going to have any. They're not going to have any choices. It's something that's been. None of the distilleries, individual distilleries, are going to have the capital for it. Is really what it's going to. We have enough ways to spend our own money on distribution, selling our product, and everything else. I've talked to Christian from House Spirits. They've considered building one. It's something that has been bounced around here and there. There's another idea that's been bounced around here and there, and that there's a lot of commercial real estate that's available in the city, but they're big buildings. Well, a lot of new distilleries that want to get started don't need 20,000 square feet. They really could get by with 1,000 square feet. So the other idea that's people have been bouncing around is somebody gets a building and you put multiple distilleries in one building, which can be done. There are some tricky issues to it, but it can be done. But none of the distilleries are going to have the capital to do that themselves. But there's definitely needs and demands from distilleries right now. And there's a lot of distilleries right now that are not conforming to the new codes, and eventually the fire marshal is going to get around to getting to them, and they're not going to be stacking their barrels more than too high. And so there's going to be a lot of change driven specifically by fire code.
Sounds like an opportunity.
Yeah. I was going to say there's actually a similar demand in the cider industry as well in cold store, that we have to keep our product refrigerated, and the volume from one turn on the tank is 80 pallets or roughly 3 52-foot or 53-foot trailers. So with that kind of volume, the cost to actually implement your own cold storage of that scale is millions of dollars. So we actually use a co-op like that, Snow Temp down in Eugene. But again, looking at potentially outgrowing that facility, which again poses its own issues. So,
Gary, you had used an expression with me about your growth in the industry. You said you're at the base of another hockey stick. What did you mean by that?
Well, a couple of things. One is for the industry in general, and then for us in particular. But again, going back to my McMinnville days, growing up there and driving by all this land that is now covered with vineyards, and looking at that, and you could have purchased some of that for about a cup of coffee an acre back in the day. And now it has exploded in price and demand, both. You've got Kendall Jackson up here now. You've got Louis Jadot. You've got a lot of Burgundy houses. You've got dire things happening in California, and everybody's looking up and going, not only is the land cheap, but they have water. This is kind of cool. And so what we're looking at is any available little section of land, especially around the Dundee Hills there, or now in the kind of spreading outward, just being purchased at almost any price. We're seeing not particularly great vineyard pieces of land on the Dundee Hills up there for around $50,000 an acre, just to buy it and clear it. And it's not even cleared yet,
Wow.
$50,000 an acre. So we're seeing that. We're seeing, and as it kind of striates out a little bit there, it's still expensive. It's way more expensive than it's ever been. And I think it's just going to keep going up right now because there's a land grab. And when Kendall Jackson comes in and buys 600 acres of planted vineyard, you're going to see the demand go up. And so we're just seeing more and more speculation. There's a lot of Chinese now looking around at our properties out there and seeing what's for sale. And you're going to see, I think, this sort of shift between it's a tough industry. Like we're all up here, and this is the glamour kind of fun stuff, but it's also agriculture, and it's also very difficult. So you're looking at a lot of families that have been out there, and they came up in that pioneering spirit. And there was a time when there was a lot of distributors and less wineries, so it was easier to have your wines distributed. Now all of a sudden that has shifted, and there's a lot larger distributors and a lot less of them, and a lot more wineries than there have ever been. And so if you're a small winery, trying to get the attention and trying to carve out your niche is much, much harder than it used to be. So it's literally one of those cases where you're seeing a lot of consolidation. So you have these families that are just going, I want out. And it's kind of cool because they're going to probably have a pretty nice exit, but there's people ready to swoop in right now. And we're seeing a lot of that happening in the industry. For us in particular, we started I started with the company in 2012. 2011, we made 9,100 cases. This year we made 41,000. So we've been scaling a little bit. We built a second facility on the property, a 32,000 square foot facility this year. And I'm sort of marveling at all the zoning and land use issues because we've certainly had our share of those too. In fact, I'm a little bit of the devil because growing up in McMinnville one more time there's not a lot to do in Mac. So you have to drive to Portland, as an example, to go see entertainment. Back in the day, in 1993, I thought it'd be really cool to bring world-class entertainment to Yamhill County at Sokol Blosser. So we brought people like Ray Charles and Tony Bennett and folks like that down. And if you've ever watched Footloose, in the court scene there, I kind of lived that. It was really cool and really frustrating at the same time to watch the polarization of the county. And I think in many ways it sort of is the confluence of the old and the new. So you've got a formerly dry county down there where there's still a lot of folks that don't believe that folks should do things like drink and dance. And at the same time, you have Kendall Jackson here now, and they're laughing at all this. So it's an interesting time. There's a lot of hockey stick trends I see.
So 10 years from now, what do you see?
Oh, I see the industry a lot bigger. Again, we're right at the base of explosive growth, and I see that you'll see a lot more AVAs, viticultural areas growing. The McMinnville area, the Eola Hills, all of that will continue to be filled out. So a lot more land development. You may not have that many more wineries in particular, but you'll have bigger ones, and the industry will be more substantial. When you look at something like a Kendall Jackson, you say, is it good or bad to have them here? If you're really small, I'm not sure it's good. But if you have a substantial distribution network like we do, they're going to go out and create a national footprint, and we're going to come in right behind it. So, I think you'll probably see more consolidation is what you'll see.
Is it a challenge to get distribution in the rest of the country? Because I'll ask because I go to the East Coast quite a bit, and I'll see maybe one or two Oregon wines when I'm in New York or Philadelphia. How accepted is it being? We know it's big here, but how about on the other coast?
I mean, New York could consume our entire 41,000 cases in a day if they wanted to. Right? I mean, it's just boom, it's gone. But it's still you have on the East Coast you have a lot of the European import sort of challenge that you have there, and Oregon still is. Chateau Saint Michel in Washington spills more wine in a year than most of Oregon makes collectively. It's just not. We're still small, but again, speaking to that trend, you're seeing more and more interest in Oregon. So I think in a 10-year phase, you're going to see a lot more Oregon wines in New York, but it's still a struggle. I mean, the farther away we get from Oregon, even though it's Pinot Noir, people are Pinot Noir crazy, you're still finding that part of it is that we haven't had the critical mass as an industry to fill the opportunities. So you've got A to Z and King Estate and Willamette Valley Vineyards out there producing well over 100,000 cases each, and then after that it dramatically starts to tail off. And so, when you look at the 450 wineries, it's a true pyramid, and that massive base of the pyramid are these guys that are producing under 10,000 cases. So getting distribution in New York, if you're under 10,000 cases, forget about it. It's not like you're making Screaming Eagle and everybody goes, oh, it's Screaming Eagle. It's, who are you? So, and if you get their attention for a day, I can assure you they're going to get someone else's attention the next day. So it's not just getting over there. It's the logistics to support it and then staying in front of these people. And the Wine Spectator gives you a great score one day. That's great. But again, you live and die by that too. So we need Kendall Jackson. We need these other guys to help get us over them for substantial distribution.
So, Lenny, as President of the United States, how will you change our... Oh, wait a minute, that's the GOP debate. I'm sorry. I looked at the wrong notes. So what other issues? What other issues do you deal with as it relates to the commercial real estate space?
Well, as I mentioned before, so as a distillery, we want to be in close, and our tasting room does exceptionally well. Our tasting room is a lot more profitable because we make more money. So we want our distillery in the city, and there's just not a lot of real estate available. When we went to go look for our building, we were really only looking for something like 10,000 square feet, and there just were very few options available. So there's not a lot of. If I was a smaller distillery, or if I was just getting started, or if I was only a year or two out, I would probably look for like a 5,000 square foot facility. But in the metro area of Portland, there's very, very few options that are just available in general. Again, there are these bigger buildings that you have to have the money. You just have to have a lot more money, and you're not going to be able to get the distribution. The distribution and everything takes time. So we're always in a catch-22 where you want to have lots of capacity, but you can't spend so much money on capacity. It's just kind of a chicken and egg sort of thing. You need supply and demand. So right now we're in a bigger building than we need, and we're hoping to fill that up and fill that production up in the next year or two.
Aaron, you've got a nice piece of your market. How big's that market going to become?
Well, cider currently is estimated around 1% of the total alcohol market in beer and wine. In the UK, it's 15 to 18%. Estimates in the Oregon market, which is one of the most developed cider markets, I like to think a little bit on us, in the US, is up to around 5% market share. I anticipate to see the rest of the country, or at least the majority of the coasts, catch up to that 5% mark. And the entire cider industry has been growing at around 70 to 80% per year, which is pretty intense for an industry as big as it is.
So this is kind of a radio guy question, but what's the demographic group that's driving it?
I think it's millennials, it's early 30s, it's craft beer drinkers are moving over, experimental. I like to think that the craft beer movement blazed a trail for us. People are now trying, sour ales, triple IPAs. Oh, can we get a quadruple IPA in the house? I mean, and eventually, it makes them adventurous drinkers, people willing to try. And as the cider market grows, it also starts to catch some people from the wine industry as well. It is a fruit wine. It's an apple wine. So there is certainly that demographic as well. Mm-hmm. And we've tried to basically have product lines that capture both the beer drinker and the 750 ml champagne bottle, cork and cage for your higher end wine drinker as well. So it's kind of nice. You get to catch both sides.
So Matthew, what I'd like to do is open it up to the room, if I may, for questions. Do we need to pass a microphone around, or no? Or I'll just repeat the question.
Yeah, it's just the natural sweetness of the fruit.
So how can we help you as real estate brokers overcome the obstacles of the zoning that you're experiencing? Because if we knew you had the problem, we could probably help get through the municipalities so they can understand that they're now wrapping their minds around the fact that in every metro market, you have to do mixed use development. This is a mixed use for agriculture.
Right.
They haven't caught up to speed because you have different agencies that button heads with. You certainly could be looking at that and trying to help you, help them understand what they need to be able to do to help you grow your business. Because again, at the end of the day, it's all about jobs.
Yeah. I mean, for us, as I look at it, I consult with probably a new cidery every week, and it's flex zoning. It's something that's already grandfathered in with system development charges, because the costs of developing a new property can be higher than the actual cost of implementing that development as far as the governmental fees are concerned. It can be many hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop a property, and that's not including any construction. That's just the permitting and system development charges. So if you have properties that were once a restaurant, or have some sort of water use and industrial use or something like that, some ex-production facilities that already have that zoning taken care of and those permits paid, that is prime gold real estate for somebody looking to start out.
Gary, how about for yourself? The same question. How can this industry help you?
Well, it's funny because you're saying it's all about jobs, and when you get down to Yamhill County, they'll make that argument that it's really not. It's almost a philosophy that there's almost this resentment towards this encroachment of opportunity. It's really the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. We fought when I first got there, we got involved in a lawsuit with the Friends of Yamhill County, who decided that it would be good to sue us for building a tasting room on our own property. And
How dare you?
and there's in the Luba record, there's actually a statement by one of the folks from Friends of Yamhill County who had said that our intent was to build an IKEA on our vineyard. And so it's just weird. It's bizarre.
So you have Swedish meatballs?
We do, yeah. Come on up. So, but you have to assemble your own furniture too. So. But it's really counterintuitive. It's not as again, it's just bizarre. Now, one thing I will say though is one of the areas that Bill Stoller has really focused on is I call it the 1969 Mach 1 Mustang and the garage find and the barn find, which is the city of Dayton. And has everybody been down to Dayton before? Folks been down there? It's a really cool community. And if we talk about Dayton in the context of today, there's not a lot of reason to go down there. If you talk about in the context of 10 years and some of this hockey stuff I'm talking about, it becomes a really compelling little industry because it's kind of like Healdsburg. It's got its own town square in the middle, and there's all this really interesting building that could be done around it. Bill Stoller started to restore a lot of the buildings and buying up kind of monopoly boarding some of that. And we feel that in time, that someplace like Dayton versus Dundee that's got the overpass now and it's got the highway in the middle of it, you've got this little community that would be a perfect place for economic development for guys like these guys to come up and start setting up distilleries and start setting up craft breweries and a lot of interesting places, new business that could be set up there. And I think you're going to attract it. Not only is there a lot of growth coming into Yamhill County in general, but, it's 99W is the second busiest highway in Oregon, and there's a lot of opportunity that's coming down that road every single day. So if you start thinking about a little community like that and saying, okay, what could you do from a real estate perspective? I think a city like Dayton, and they're looking, I mean, they're friendly to this. It's one of the bright spots in Yamhill County where they're really saying, we believe we've got something here too. So that's a thought.
Some great possibilities that we've been talking about. Other questions? Matthew?
Yes, I appreciate your story about Luba because everybody in this room has a war story about zoning or permitting or delivering space. Aaron, I'd like you to share your story about going to Eastside Center and then what's your move?
Sure.
And maybe SDCs and other things like that.
Yeah, so when we first started out, the concept of the scale that we would reach was, we had no idea that it was going to get to that kind of scale. So we started in essentially a small garage. And at that point, the facilities that we had there were more than competent to take care of what we needed. We had a new facility built for us by the owner of that property. And something that he didn't necessarily take into account was wastewater disposal there. And unlike a winery that we have, might have production once a year, we have production day in, day out, every day of the year. So our wastewater component of our business outgrew the facilities there, and that became one of the sole deciding factors for how and where we would set up our next facility. So we actually had to go to the city of Corvallis and find a industrial property that was connected to city utilities that was capable of handling, 30,000 gallons of water a day. And that's something that is a bit beyond what we can potentially do even with a bioswale or anything else. So that's limiting in some regards that our facility has to be in an urban center. Is that what you were trying to get at?
Well, and what about TIs and did you get any enterprise zone?
Yeah, we did get enterprise zone for that, and that savings is there, but it's not significant. It's a couple $1,000s a year. The system development charges is where, luckily my mother was used to be the director or assistant director of planning for Corvallis, so I had a little help there navigating that. But we had, I think, just the overall understanding from a government perspective of what our industry is doing is a challenge, or their lack thereof. We had requirements to put backflow valves on tanks that aren't plumbed to anything. They're freestanding tanks that have backflow valves. What are we going to backflow? I was told at one point to install explosive-proof storage lockers to put cider at 6% ABV in a locker that, I mean, it would put out a fire. But these things all incur costs in your construction and ultimately more fees as far as the permitting of them as well. And I find that whether or not they're necessary, I feel that a lot of requirements may be enacted to help bolster the fees associated to the government agency that's regulating your property. So you may have to be fighting some things that may be pretty unnecessary.
Thank you.
I had a question for actually more geared towards the distilled spirits. The storage for aging of your product, does that have to be in a bonded warehouse at the time it leaves your door, or similar to a cider works or brewery, can you lease a building and house your product there until it goes to a bonded warehouse?
The space would need to be a bonded warehouse, but yes, it would need to be a bonded warehouse, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. Like
Okay.
the space itself just needs to be bonded.
Okay, shameless plug, come to Salem. You can stack more than 2 high.
Find someone to build the building.
I know a guy.
There you go.
If somebody builds it, they will come. There's 140 distilleries in Washington that everyone's making whiskey. Woodinville Whiskey up in Washington trucks all their whiskey, hundreds of barrels at a time, to Eastern Washington so they can store it because they can't store anything in their building. Nothing.
I have a question as it relates to whiskey. White or brown? Where's it going?
Oh, definitely.
I
Brown.
shouldn't say whiskey, but you know.
I mean, the white whiskey or unaged whiskey or white dog is a fad. It's kind of neat. It's kind of fun. Unaged whiskey is not that tasty, especially bourbon. Something like rye is actually pretty good. Wheat whiskey is actually pretty good. Corn whiskey that's raw tastes like alcoholic grits. So.
But as far as like the vodka, the tequila versus the brown whiskey, vodka's been huge in the last decade. Is that continuing, or is it turning the other way now?
The big growth in the market right now is whiskey, and millennials and women are now drinking whiskey. 5 years ago, they were all drinking vodka. Now they all drink whiskey. As far as I can tell, everything's moving to brown spirits, and it'll be tequila and rum and brandy, but everything's moving to brown spirits.
Interesting. Sir.
Given the regulations you're facing in city centers, is there a reason you're not moving production out and just having tasting rooms? More tasting rooms, more retail frontage, and less production in those areas?
Because I want my bottle to say made in Portland. And if I produce it in Estacada, I have to say it's produced in Estacada on the bottle, TTB regulations.
And how important is that to the consumer?
Well, it's very important. That way everyone knows it's a Portland product. If it says made in Portland right on the bottle, then everyone knows that. So.
Got a question over here. Gary, can you comment about the Newburgh bypass, industrial expansion, or growth boundary potential? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I was just reading about they're on the. If you've been down that way, you'll see that the overpass, the first 4 mile phase is now done. There's some concern about how they're going to fund and also some of the land use around the totality of the 11 mile complete bypass, which starts right around Dayton and ends up just north of Newburgh. And I think your point is there's a lot of great opportunity there. It becomes less of just a congested, let's go to the beach or the casinos route, and actually let's go down there for economic purposes. Let's go, as a tourist, I want to go down there. A lot of people we find don't want to come down anymore because it's just so congested, especially getting home. It's just a nightmare. I found out there was just a article in the News Register saying that there's some concern that the fact that the county had a chance they had to fund a certain part of the bypass beyond the first phase. I think it was by 2008, and they didn't put money in, so developers have come in and started to claim the property. And so there's a little bit of I don't know what's going to happen, some uncertainty around that. If it happens, I think that places like Dayton and even Dundee are going to thrive more, and a lot of the wineries will, because people will want to come down there with more frequency. my take.
To address Gary's point, being from McMinnville, I just had a meeting with the McMinnville Economic Development. We kind of asked that question. And from the outskirts of McMinnville, so from the city limits, you can reach I-5 in 2 stoplights now. Once the bypass is done in 2017, 2 stoplights and you're on I-5.
And are you hearing if it's going to continue to move forward? What have you heard about that, Mike?
Early 2017.
Well, that's the first phase. I haven't heard about the second phase.
Yeah, there was just a thing in the News Register about it. Yeah,
exactly. So
a little dicey.
and we can if you give us $10, we'll show you the back road to get you through those 2 stoplights.
Toll. Other questions? Sir.
Related to the fire marshal issue, I think we all, as brokers, run into this constantly with putting tenants in spaces. Do you feel that the fire marshal has been a little bit overzealous in general? Because they send these guys all to the same school back on the East Coast, and they come back every year. High files of combustible storage rules, and all these other rules. It sounds like they're totally uninformed about alcohol and distillation.
Well, we've reached out to pretty much every distillery in every urban distillery that we can get a hold of in every city. And what my thoughts have always been is that they want us as the distillers, as the Oregon Distillers Guild, they want our industry to actually write the new guide. And the fire marshal has told me to my face that he doesn't really, it's not really his job to investigate every individual code, every individual. It's not really his job, and he doesn't really have the resources to basically rewrite all of the rules for the fire code for distilleries. And so in absence of that, he's going, yes, wants stuff to be explosive proof. Alcohol does not explode, which I have said to the fire marshal to his face. And yeah, I've had the same problem where I have something that's 30% alcohol that's treated exactly the same as something that's 95% alcohol. I actually lit a match and threw it in there. It did not catch on fire. So I think it's more of a, I don't know if the city is understaffed. I don't know exactly what the situation is, but it's always been my belief that, and I have tried to work with the Distillers Guild and other distilleries, that we need to hire our own experts and we need to write our own guide. Otherwise, it's all being done piecemeal. And House Spirits has spent 2 years getting into their building, and you have to bring in fire experts, and it's very, for each individual point that the city wants. So I don't know what the clear solution is to that, but it's very difficult, and it's time consuming and very expensive. Yes. If that's going to happen, sure.
Eastside Distilling, I got a pretty good idea why you have your name, Stoller Estates, from a family. 2 towns, where did that come from?
Sure. So, kind of walk both ends of the Civil War there. We all grew up in Corvallis, Oregon. I went down to school down in Eugene. I was a duck. Yeah, there you go. But I'm pretty much the sole one in the building. But so I keep my mouth shut till we win. But basically, both of us had spent half our lives in one or the other of the cities, and I like to think of them kind of as a yin-yang. Very similar, very complementary cities, but so polar opposite in the culture and the schools. One being the liberal arts and one being more the engineering and ag. So it's really an interesting combination of sometimes oil and water, but most of the time it's pretty good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Gary. Are you guys, you mentioned the growth within the ag industry and the other wineries coming in and driving up prices. Are you guys pursuing real estate, or are you going to purchase grapes? And if you are pursuing real estate, what's the sweet spot for you? What's it take? Soils, water, whatever that might be. And what's it cost to develop a vineyard for you?
Yeah, a great question. For us, it's a little bit different than maybe some of the other folks because we have estate in our name, and we really want to stay true to that. So when we say we're 100% estate, that means we have to control that property. And so we're looking for something that's close in the Dundee Hills that matches the profiles of what we're already making. So the Jory soil, of course, is sort of the money shot. That's what everybody's looking for. There's quite a bit of it around, Ribbon Ridge and the Yola Hills. There is evidence of Jory soil in all those places. So that's really a high consideration for us. As you get into the different kinds of soil types, you do get different taste profiles. So, each winery may want a second soil type to create a second tier. So it depends on each winery. So we wouldn't want something from Yola Hills because it wouldn't blend well with what we have. We don't want to create a second tier, those kinds of things. But Kettle Jackson is going, Pinot, let's get it. You're not going to get 600 acres in the Dundee Hills. In fact, there's a beautiful piece of property right beside us that as long as the guy is alive, he's never going to develop it, and we've got first rights of refusal on it. But it's like Park Place on the Monopoly board right now. There's very little that's left in the Dundee Hills, so people are now looking outside of that. You're looking at about 10 grand an acre, pretty much, to put in what you want to do to develop it. And a lot of this is really rocky, so you got to get in there and you got to really till it up and you got to do a lot of work on it. So, but as you get out, you're looking at 40,000 an acre, 30,000 an acre kind of stuff the further away. But Sheridan now, out past west of McMinnville and all that, you're seeing a lot of development taking place out there now. It's been out there. The Highland Vineyard's been out there forever, but now all around that, out past Carlton and that area, you're seeing a tremendous amount of development. So I think that what you're going to see is what's left, and let's start developing that. They're really in that Dundee, Dayton area. There's not very much that's on hillsides, and you really don't want to go flat for what we do. It just isn't going to produce the kind of fruit. You're below the frost line. There's all kinds of issues. So you get up around 300-400 feet elevation. That's where you really want to start looking. So there is some out there still, and again, I think one of the best things you can be looking for is there is some to be developed, but there's also some to be sold. And then you start getting into things like rootstock. What was it planted on? Because you may have to go in there and rip it all out because Phloraxera could be in there and absolutely, look at that and you've got a damaged vineyard. Now you got to go in there, treat the soil, wait, replant. So, but if you've got a piece of property that's going to go way up in value over the next 5 or 10 years or longer, why wouldn't you do it? So,
I think the idea of owning a vineyard is kind of glamorous sounding, but as you said, it's agriculture.
Yeah, if anybody ever saw the Oregon Cal game in 2013, do you remember that game? Well, you could sort of see the game because it was raining so hard, and that was a 50-year rain event, and all of our young fruit came in. This is for the Valley. All the young fruit came in right before that because there was a huge cyclone in the Philippines, and it disrupted global weather patterns. So by the time it got to us, all the young fruit came in pretty nicely, but with Pinot Noir, you really want hang time, the older mature fruit to hang. So we waited, and a lot of folks waited, and we had this about 13 inches in rain about a day and a half. So that'll test you. That's one of those things where you just, what are you going to do? So, yeah.
2 years ago, something happened. They were harvesting 2 weeks prior down in Southern Oregon. You guys got caught right in that rainfall.
Yeah, it is, and it's crazy because, in Oregon, we've had a lot of weather variability. In 2011 was the latest harvest in record. We finished on Thanksgiving Day. This season, we had 3 things. We had the earliest harvest ever. We started on August 26th. The most compressed harvest, we were done by the 3rd week of September, and the heaviest harvest ever. So everybody missed the numbers on their fruit. And so I wanted 32,000 cases. I got 41,000 cases. So, it was just one of those years where no one could get the crop estimates right because it's wacky out there right now. So
are you seeing a lot of environmental refugees coming up from California? Because the biggest problem we see here is that what we consider to be big farms and what they consider to be big farms are big cattle.
Yeah.
You have a lot of mom and pop operations that are 50 plus acres. A farm to them is 500 plus. That's just like a 500.
yeah, you're starting to see that come up here with more and more frequency. I mean, it's just the cost of doing business down there is so expensive compared to up here. So you are seeing that. And the good news is we're benefiting from the institutional knowledge that they're bringing up here. But the other side of it is that Oregon and California are very different animals to manage. So a vineyard manager from California has still got a huge learning curve in Oregon because their vintage variability over only 5 or 10 years is about 10%. And in Oregon, it's like a roller coaster.
On their farm practices.
Completely different. Yeah, exactly right.
Their labor is
Yeah, and labor is,
Then we have it in Washington, because you have those great farmers in the eastern part of Washington bring their skill set to an industry that just flourished because of that farm practice, not for any other reason. You guys knew how to farm product.
well, we have the minimum wage issues, and we have, the economy improving, and so a lot of the folks aren't available for these jobs anymore. That same year, 2013, we had a labor shortage when everybody had to pick because the fruit was going to either rot because of that rain. It was a labor shortage, so those are challenges too for agriculture.
Anybody else?
You've become vertically integrated, so you're now growing your own apples.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, we're an agricultural product. People expect, just like a vineyard, you go in and they want to know, where's your fruit coming from. We certainly do source fruit from Hood River, from Yakima Valley. We also contract with a number of growers in the Willamette Valley. But the big one for us is that the apple varietals that are traditional for classic ciders, European-style ciders, don't exist in the U.S. because those cultivars were destroyed during Prohibition to curb illegal alcohol production. So we have to import and then replant orchards of, Kingston Black, Dabinett, Medal d'Or. These varietals do not exist in the U.S. They estimate, at least in 2013, they estimated 200 acres in the entire nation. So that ain't going to do it for our type of cider production. So we're hoping as we grow to be able to augment a portion of our juice in every batch with these traditional varietals. Now you can make a very competent cider with the varieties that are available to us here, but there are certain flavor profiles that are necessary if you're trying to do a French, Normandy style cider. You need the fruit. I mean, it's like trying to make a Pinot Noir with a grape, a table grape. It's just not going to happen. So, we do our very best to scrounge the varieties we can find, and we look for tannins, acids, sugar levels, and we try to blend to basically accomplish what we could get in a single varietal from a traditional cider fruit. So if that it's kind of a complicated job and of continually sourcing fruit, and of course different varieties are available at different points of the year as well. Also, a lot of varieties are biennial, so you'll get a big harvest one year and nothing the next. So if you want a consistent product, and consistency is much more of a concern, especially for our draft, our on-tap products, it is actually quite a challenge continuing to find the right blend to keep a product consistent throughout the year.
Have you considered opening production in Europe where you can get the apples you need?
Well, you can actually import the apples as well. It's just a matter of cost. And we also source all of our fruit from the Northwest. And that's a big thing for us is while we like European-style ciders, we think that this is the new world. And we have 2/3 to 70% of the apple production in the U.S. in Oregon and Washington. Why not use that resource and start a new industry with a new taste, a flavor profile? And it, I think, to a large extent, has become very successful. There is a growing international demand for Northwest cider. So.
Pear cider? Is that not really
Perry?
pear cider?
Yeah, it's a pear cider, which is a cider made with pears. It exists as well. Just the volume of pear fruit is much smaller, and the Perries, the Perry pears, are also not very prevalent in the U.S. So again, if you want to do a traditional Perry, you would probably best start importing fruit or clippings to graft.
Well, I found these stories fascinating because it has become such a signature of our state in the Northwest, and it's a lot of fun to see it grow, and hopefully it will have ramifications for the real estate industry and all the things that are involved with it. So I'd like to thank our speakers today, Lenny Goddard from Eastside Distilling, Aaron Sarnoff, and Gary Mortenson. Thank you very much, gentlemen.